So welcome to my Daredevil Born Again episode 5 review. I'm going to be reviewing these episodes separate because they're very, very different episodes, and I have quite a lot to say about episode 6. I've got quite a lot of thoughts on it. So I wanted to split this up so that this wasn't too long. So episode 5 was a bit of a weird one. We had a double drop this week. I'm assuming they're kind of like staggering their double drops. They sort of did it almost with Agatha all along, where we got like 2 episodes at the start and then 2 episodes at the end. It looks like for Daredevil Born Again, to get it out before Thunderbolts comes out, to get it completely out of the way so that there's room for Thunderbolts, it seems like they're doing like 2 episodes at the start, 2 episodes in the middle, and then 2 at the end. I'm hoping that's what it is, because I like a nice little double episode drop, especially when they're like this, because these were both good episodes, but again, they were very, very different. So let's talk about episode 5, which was the heist. I think it's very curious that we got like a double episode drop, and it was these 2 specific episodes, because I think there's been the main chatter about this show is that it's moving too slowly in giving us Daredevil and Kingpin back. It does a bit of a hard reset for the characters, and we don't really see Daredevil or Kingpin actually be those characters. This is the Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk show for the first 5 episodes, and we'll talk about episode 6 and how that quickly changes. But this episode was a very like Matt Murdock heavy episode. Kingpin wasn't in it at all. We got some cameos, which was pretty cool, and we got quite a few references to the outside MCU, and just, I don't know, this one to me felt the most like a kind of self-contained little single issue comic that didn't, like, you know when you're reading a series of a character, like say you're reading a Daredevil series, and every so often there'll be an issue in there that goes off and explores something else that isn't really relevant to the rest of the series. And this kind of felt like that. Though it did have some relevance, just not as much as I think it needed. And this was making me think the most about how they restructured the show from what it was originally meant to be, which was supposed to be a kind of CSI style. That's my reference for this, is a CSI style, like different case every single episode. Kind of network show, right? Growing up, I didn't watch a lot of network shows because in the UK it's a little bit different. We've got like soap operas and things like that. Network shows weren't really a thing for me growing up, aside from CSI, where every single week was something different. And that's how I've kind of approached maybe like how they were restructuring the show initially. And this is, for me, the most self-contained episode. You could turn this episode on with no prior knowledge of any character that is in it, and you will get enough of an introduction to kind of vaguely understand that Matt Murdock's not entirely blind. Kamala Khan's dad is in this, and his daughter is Miss Marvel, which he makes a point of saying multiple times, and there's a bank heist. Like, that is the story of the episode. And again, this could have been thrown in any of the seasons prior. This could have been, it's just, I don't know, it's not a throwaway episode. It just didn't have any meaning to be here, really, aside from like one little reference that we then get in the next episode to explain why this episode exists. It's not strong in concept, but in execution I think they did a pretty good job. So Kamala Khan's dad. Let's talk about it, because we're getting so much Young Avengers stuff being thrown at us. And I think it's unfortunate that the general audience at the moment isn't really receptive to this, because anybody that has read the comics for the Young Avengers, whether it's the 2005 run, I just finished reading the 2013 run, they're brilliant. They are really, really good. They are great comics with really, like, charismatic, good characters in. And the MCU is clearly setting them up, whether they're going to be branded under, you know, Young Avengers, New Avengers, Champions, West Coast Avengers, whatever they're going to be branded as, maybe just Avengers. like Avengers New Blood or some shit. They're clearly they're great characters, and they're clearly being set up, and I think it's a shame that so many people are so against the idea, because I feel like people haven't read these comics, clearly, otherwise they would know that these are good characters. The general response is that these are good series to be introducing new characters and stuff. Like Young Avengers is a good series. It's got a great villain and stuff. We're not going to go too far into a review of Young Avengers, but my point is that it's good, right? And the Disney Plus shows have made a point of introducing characters that could appear on a Young Avengers team, whether it be a new White Tiger that we're getting set up in this, whether it's references to Miss Marvel, Kate Bishop, Wiccan, Speed. We got a tease at Patriot. We're seeing the next era of Marvel superheroes be introduced through these Disney Plus shows. And generally, people, from what I can see, aren't into it. And this episode went in hard, and so does episode 6. This episode went in hard on establishing that Miss Marvel is here, she is assembling a team just like she did at the end of the Marvels, and they're over in the West Coast Avengers. Who knows what's going on, but I thought it was a cool reference. They went a little bit too hard on it. Like, I get that it's the commentary there is like she's a super fan of Miss Marvel and she's a super fan of Captain Marvel rather, and she's a super fan of the Avengers and things, and in turn her dad is a super fan of her, which is really, really nice. But it was just a little bit too much for me. I was like, look, I get it, okay? We can move on. You don't have to keep mentioning that Miss Marvel is your daughter. Especially that Matt Murdock hasn't even heard of her. I was like, how? Matt Murdock, who has been over to the West Coast. Is that not where She-Hulk was set? In California? San Francisco? I don't know my USA geography, but I was like, there's no way that he's not heard of Miss Marvel. That's wild. He didn't even like correct him and was like, don't you mean Captain Marvel or anything like that? Matt Murdock's just like tuned out when it comes to any other vigilante or superhero. But in terms of the actual story of the episode, we had a group of Irish mobsters robbing a bank on St. Patrick's Day. Quite fitting, considering it was St. Patrick's Day, like, last week, I think. Or maybe it was this past Monday, I can't remember. So it was pretty appropriate timing. I'm surprised that they didn't time the episode to come out a little bit closer to it, actually. They could have definitely released it last week if they'd grouped up a couple of the previous episodes. But yeah, that was the basic gist of it, is that it was just a heist story, and it gets revealed that these mobsters are coming after a diamond in a safety deposit box. We get some hijinks and stuff, and, Matt's trying to figure out how to take some of them down and hold off until the police can come in, and we get some banter between the lead of these mobsters, which is doing his best Colin Farrell impression. He looks a lot like Colin Farrell. I had to double take a couple of times because they made him look a lot like him. And the idea here is that Luca, who we saw briefly in a previous episode, he's the tracksuit mafia looking guy. I thought he might have been a little bit more heavily linked to the tracksuit mafia, considering how he looked in the previous episode. But he's got a debt that he owes somebody else. That's the extent that I'm following for this storyline. I don't really... I don't know if I'm missing anything else, but he's got a debt that he owes for somebody else who owes Kingpin or something. It's all linked together, right? Kingpin's at the top, these guys are at the bottom, and they're doing it, to settle a score with Kingpin in the long run. So they're going after a diamond. There's a whole switcheroo, and basically Matt foils their plans, and one of the guys, the Colin Farrell looking fella, tries to get away. Matt dons one of their red masks that they brought in with them and brutalizes him in the street round the corner and breaks his leg in half. And then we get the reveal that he left the actual diamond after a bit of a bait and switch to Yusuf Khan. Now, whether or not Yusuf Khan returns it to the bank or does something with that diamond, I have no idea. Maybe, and I'm going out on a limb here, but maybe that diamond is going to fund the Young Avengers initiative. I'm going out on a limb. And I am saying that, okay? Because they made a point of saying that it's very, very expensive, very rare diamond, okay? They made a big point of it. I reckon that could be the explanation that we get, okay? Now, again, I've got more about the Young Avengers to say than I do about the actual episode because, you know, they made a point of putting Yusuf Khan in this episode and bigging up Miss Marvel and mentioning West Coast Avengers and, you know, all of the references that we needed to hit were hit. And I think that to the extent, I don't even know what the extent means. For the most part, I think a lot of people are watching this show and thinking, why are we using Daredevil to set up the Young Avengers? Why are we watching, you know, Agatha all along to set up the Young Avengers? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that to set up the Young Avengers? And push comes to shove, let's be real, the Defenders on Netflix was set up the exact same way and nobody had a fucking issue with how it was set up. People were excited, okay? And I don't understand why there's such like a pushback on this. My only explanation for it would be the generalization of the characters themselves. A lot of them are queer. Is that the reason they don't like them? I don't know. This is going to turn into like a rant about why, like a pitch for why we should get the Young Avengers in the MCU already. I'm pretty certain they've got a writer attached to that show. And I'm pretty certain it's going to like go into development now and they're going to form between Doomsday and Secret Wars and whatever. We've already seen there's leaked set photos from Daredevil Season 2 of White Tiger and Daredevil doing some stuff. I'm excited for that. We'll get onto more White Tiger-y stuff on the discussion about Episode 6. But again, like, it was a solid episode. There was nothing wrong with it. It's not the weakest episode either. I thought that this was better than Episode 2 and Episode 4. But this, again, it kind of felt useless. You could completely skip this episode and it wouldn't affect anything. As far as I know, at least so far. So, that's my review of the episode. Is that it was mostly pointless. It was still a nice little watch. It was a nice little self-contained. I'm looking at my Daredevil little money bank thing on my desk. I feel bad. I'm like, I have nothing to say about you this week. Until we get to the next episode. But yeah, I had more to say about the Young Avengers than I do this episode. And that's probably not a good thing. But I think, you know, it was one of those that you could, like, turn on the episode, switch your brain off, enjoy it, turn it off, crack on. I think it makes sense that they did the double drop for these two particular episodes because they probably realised that this episode, being so self-contained, would stand out as, like, the oddball. And it's like, oh, people waited a week to see this. You know, like, there would have been quite a bit of backlash if you had to wait a week to see this and it was just a self-contained standalone Matt Murdock thing. So I think it makes a lot of sense. They were clever with it. Let's talk about the second the episode 6. The second episode as part of the drop. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to chop this up. But yeah, the review for episode 6 will be uploaded right after this. Good grief. Thank you for listening to me ramble about the Young Avengers, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.